Hey guys, welcome back. So, if you're here tonight, I'm guessing you've probably dimmed the lights, maybe you've got a cup of tea on your nightstand, and you've resigned yourself to letting me mumble on about dead people until you drift into unconsciousness. Good choice, because tonight we're starting a long, winding, slightly ridiculous journey into the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. Now, you've probably heard of Rome. It's that empire that lasted forever, conquered everything, and gave us way too many marble statues of half-naked emperors trying to look heroic. But as with most grand empires, Rome didn't actually begin as a glorious military powerhouse. No, it started with some bickering brothers, a wolf, and a myth that sounds more like a rejected fairy tale than the origin story of the so-called greatest empire in history. So settle in, let's float gently back to the beginning. The Wolf Children. Rome's origin myth is basically, once upon a time, two abandoned twins were raised by a wolf. That's Romulus and Remus. Very normal, because apparently in early Italy, when humans failed at parenting, wolves just picked up the slack. Totally believable. Anyway, the twins grow up, they decide to found a city, and, of course, they immediately fight over whose name should go on the mailbox. Romulus kills Remus, brotherly love at its finest, and boom, Rome is born. Congratulations, Romulus. You win the prize for worst sibling in history, and also the weird honor of being remembered forever as the guy whose name became Rome. And this sets the tone, because Rome, from the very beginning, is all about ambition, pettiness, and murder. Get used to it. From kings to we don't like kings. At first, Rome actually had kings, which sounds impressive until you realize that most of them were just slightly fancier tribal leaders with a flair for bossing people around. They wore purple cloaks, which in the ancient world basically screamed, "I'm important and I overpay for dye." But eventually, the Romans got sick of monarchs, especially because the last king, Tarquin the Proud, yes, that was literally his nickname, decided to rule like a complete jerk. He thought the people existed to fund his building projects and tolerate his awful family. Spoiler, they didn't. So around 509 BCE, the Romans kicked him out and proudly declared, "We're done with kings forever." Which, of course, is hilarious because centuries later they would invent emperors who were basically kings with better branding. But we'll get there, slowly. Enter the Republic. So after canceling monarchy, Rome becomes a republic, which sounds democratic and modern, but wasn't at all. The Senate was basically a private club for old rich men in togas who like to argue. Think country club, but dustier, with fewer golf carts and way more stabbings. The Republic worked, sort of. Ordinary citizens, called plebeians, had almost no power, while the patricians, the rich elite, got to make all the big decisions. But because Rome loved pretending it was fair, they invented things like tribunes to represent the common people. Nice idea, except the tribunes were usually bribed or intimidated, so yeah, democracy. Still, the Republic managed to grow. And by grow, I mean they started conquering their neighbors like a kid stealing lunch money. Every time Rome fought a war, it just absorbed more land, more people, and more excuses to brag about itself. Rome versus everyone. Now, if you've ever played a strategy game, you know that expanding nonstop usually ends in chaos. Rome, however, made it an art form. They fought the Etruscans, the Samnites, and basically every hill tribe in Italy. And once they ran out of locals to bully, they set their sights across the Mediterranean. Cue the Punic Wars. This is Rome's big grudge match against Carthage, a rich North African city-state that had the audacity to be good at trade and have elephants. Yes, elephants, which immediately makes this story better. The Carthaginian general, Hannibal, famously marched elephants across the Alps to attack Rome. Elephants! Through snow. Imagine the logistics nightmare. The Romans were terrified, not because Hannibal was brilliant, but because elephants. And yet, somehow, Rome survived. Eventually, they crushed Carthage so thoroughly that they literally poured salt into the ruins so nothing could grow there again. Was this practical? No. Was it petty? Absolutely. And thus, Rome officially became the Mediterranean's biggest bully. From republic to reality show. Here's where things get messy. With all this new land and wealth, Rome's politicians got rich, lazy, and corrupt, which, to be fair, is kind of the natural evolution of politics. Senators stopped caring about the people, started buying luxury villas, and basically turned the republic into one giant reality show, complete with rival factions and endless drama. Enter figures like Julius Caesar. You know him, ambitious general, womanizer, owner of one very unfortunate death scene. Caesar was brilliant on the battlefield and very good at making himself look heroic in his own writings. Pro tip, if you want to be remembered as a genius, write your own biography. Works every time. But the Senate, naturally, didn't trust him because Caesar was way too popular with the public. He threw fancy games, gave out free grain, and basically invented the political stunt. The people adored him. The Senate, not so much. Julius Caesar, the man, the myth, the pincushion. So in 44 BCE, a bunch of senators famously stabbed Caesar 23 times in the theater of Pompey. Why? Because they thought murdering him would save the Republic. Spoiler, it didn't. Instead, they just triggered another round of civil wars. Because nothing says peace and stability like murdering the most popular guy in the city. And Caesar's death also gave us history's most awkward last words, et tu, Brute, which basically means, really? You too, buddy? Imagine being stabbed by your entire friend group and realizing, wow, maybe I wasn't as likable as I thought. Enter Augustus, the first emperor. After Caesar's death, Rome tore itself apart in yet another series of civil wars. At one point, Mark Antony teamed up with Cleopatra, and yes, there was a lot of dramatic boat imagery, but eventually Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, came out on top. Octavian was smart. Unlike Caesar, he didn't call himself king. Instead, he branded himself as princeps, which means first citizen. Totally not a monarch, right? Just the most important citizen who controls the army, the treasury, and every law. Definitely not a king. Wink. He also took the name Augustus because nothing says new regime like a rebrand. And just like that, Rome the Republic quietly slid into being Rome the Empire. Nobody admitted it, but everyone knew it. Imperial vibes. So here we are. The Roman Empire is born. Augustus plays it cool, building roads, aqueducts, and propaganda monuments. He also loved peace, or at least the kind of peace where you brutally conquer everything and then declare the fighting over. Historians call this the Pax Romana. The empire stabilized, trade flourished, and Romans got really into luxury. Wealthy elites decorated their villas with mosaics, feasted on peacock tongues, and tried to outdo each other in decadence. Meanwhile, the average citizen still lived in cramped, noisy apartment blocks where the biggest danger wasn't war, but fire. So, fun times. Let's pause here for a breath, because the empire is just getting started, and already we've had sibling murder, elephant marches, and an emperor who swore he wasn't a king. Part 2. Rome's early emperors, dysfunction, decadence, and questionable life choices. Hey guys, welcome back. If you're still awake, congratulations. You've survived the birth of Rome, Julius Caesar's very bad day, and the invention of emperors who weren't kings but definitely acted like them. Tonight, we're drifting into the lives of the emperors who followed Augustus. And trust me, this is where the Roman Empire really finds its stride, in chaos. So, tuck in a little deeper because we're about to meet a parade of royals who managed to combine supreme power with terrible judgment. Tiberius, the reluctant emperor. After Augustus died in 14 CE, the throne passed to his stepson, Tiberius.
Not his first choice, by the way. Augustus kept switching his heirs like someone indecisive in a restaurant. Like, maybe I'll have Agrippa. No, wait. Maybe Gaius or Lucius. Never mind. They're dead. Fine. Tiberius it is. Tiberius was, to put it gently, not thrilled. He was a competent general, sure, but he hated politics. He didn't like crowds. He didn't like Rome. Honestly, he didn't even like people. And yet, here he was, emperor of the world's biggest empire. His reign started fine. He kept things running smoothly, expanded the borders a bit, and pretended he was enjoying himself. But the Senate hated him, the people found him boring, and eventually Tiberius just gave up on trying. He retired to Capri. Yes, the island, where he basically became history's grumpiest recluse. Ancient sources say he filled his villa with unspeakable debauchery. Now, historians argue about whether this was true or just propaganda to make him look bad. But either way, the image stuck. Tiberius, the cranky emperor hiding on an island while Rome quietly judged him. Caligula, chaos in a crown. Next up, Caligula. Real name, Gaius. Nickname, Caligula, meaning little boot, because as a child, he dressed up in a mini soldier outfit while tagging along with the army. Cute, right? Unfortunately, adulthood was less cute. Caligula started off beloved. He was young, charming, and promised good times. For the first few months, everyone adored him. And then something snapped. Maybe it was illness, maybe it was stress, or maybe absolute power really does corrupt absolutely. Whatever the cause, Caligula went off the rails. He drained the treasury on wild parties, declared himself a living god, and built lavish palaces while ignoring government. The stories about him are legendary. He supposedly appointed his horse, Incitatus, as consul. Now, historians debate if this was literal or just a sarcastic joke about how incompetent Roman officials were. But honestly, both versions fit his vibe. He also reportedly liked to force senators to grovel, spent fortunes on pointless projects, and had people executed on whims. Basically, Caligula turned Rome into his personal stage play, and nobody enjoyed being cast in it. His reign ended the obvious way: assassination. After 4 years of chaos, his own guards stabbed him to death. Honestly, a solid reminder that even in Rome, you can't annoy everyone and expect to survive.
Claudius, the surprise emperor. Now, when Caligula died, everyone panicked. Who's next? Enter Claudius, Caligula's uncle. He wasn't exactly the expected choice. In fact, he had a reputation as the awkward, stuttering family member who liked books too much. Everyone assumed he'd be too weak or too clumsy to rule. Surprise! Claudius turned out to be good at it. He expanded the empire, including the conquest of Britain, which meant Romans could now complain about the weather in another country. He also improved the legal system, encouraged public works, and generally proved he wasn't as useless as everyone thought. But of course, because this is Rome, his personal life was a soap opera. He married several times, usually to women who plotted against him. His fourth wife, Agrippina, the younger, was the most ambitious of them all. She convinced him to adopt her son, Nero, as heir. Then, allegedly, she poisoned Claudius with mushrooms. Moral of the story? Never trust mushrooms. Nero, the disaster artist. Ah, Nero, possibly the most infamous emperor of them all. And honestly, he lived up to the hype. Nero started young, becoming emperor at 16. At first, things looked promising. His tutor was the philosopher Seneca, so people thought, maybe this boy will be wise. Spoiler, he wasn't. Nero quickly revealed that his true passion wasn't ruling, but performing. He loved acting, singing, and playing the lyre.
Imagine if the leader of the world's biggest empire decided his main career goal was to be a theater kid. That was Nero. He also loved extravagance. He built the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, an enormous palace with a rotating dining room, lakes, gardens, and enough marble to make future historians roll their eyes. Meanwhile, the common people were suffering from high taxes and constant mismanagement. And then came the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE. Half the city burned down. Ancient sources claim Nero played the lyre while watching the flames, hence the famous phrase, Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Probably not literally true, since fiddles didn't exist yet, but the image stuck, and honestly, it fits. After the fire, Nero blamed the Christians, leading to brutal persecutions. Meanwhile, his popularity collapsed. His paranoia grew. He had his own mother killed. He had Seneca, his tutor, forced to commit suicide. Eventually, the Senate declared him a public enemy. Nero's response, he panicked, fled, and finally committed suicide. His last words? What an artist dies in me. Not exactly humble, but very on brand.
Claudius, the surprise emperor. Now, when Caligula died, everyone panicked. Who's next? Enter Claudius, Caligula's uncle. He wasn't exactly the expected choice. In fact, he had a reputation as the awkward, stuttering family member who liked books too much. Everyone assumed he'd be too weak or too clumsy to rule. Surprise! Claudius turned out to be good at it. He expanded the empire, including the conquest of Britain, which meant Romans could now complain about the weather in another country. He also improved the legal system, encouraged public works, and generally proved he wasn't as useless as everyone thought. But of course, because this is Rome, his personal life was a soap opera. He married several times, usually to women who plotted against him. His fourth wife, Agrippina, the younger, was the most ambitious of them all. She convinced him to adopt her son, Nero, as heir. Then, allegedly, she poisoned Claudius with mushrooms. Moral of the story? Never trust mushrooms. Nero, the disaster artist. Ah, Nero, possibly the most infamous emperor of them all. And honestly, he lived up to the hype. Nero started young, becoming emperor at 16. At first, things looked promising. His tutor was the philosopher Seneca, so people thought, maybe this boy will be wise. Spoiler, he wasn't. Nero quickly revealed that his true passion wasn't ruling, but performing. He loved acting, singing, and playing the lyre. Imagine if the leader of the world's biggest empire decided his main career goal was to be a theater kid. That was Nero. He also loved extravagance. He built the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, an enormous palace with a rotating dining room, lakes, gardens, and enough marble to make future historians roll their eyes. Meanwhile, the common people were suffering from high taxes and constant mismanagement. And then came the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE. Half the city burned down. Ancient sources claim Nero played the lyre while watching the flames, hence the famous phrase, Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Probably not literally true, since fiddles didn't exist yet, but the image stuck, and honestly, it fits. After the fire, Nero blamed the Christians, leading to brutal persecutions. Meanwhile, his popularity collapsed. His paranoia grew. He had his own mother killed. He had Seneca, his tutor, forced to commit suicide. Eventually, the Senate declared him a public enemy. Nero's response, he panicked, fled, and finally committed suicide. His last words? What an artist dies in me. Not exactly humble, but very on brand. The year of 4 emperors. After Nero's death, Rome plunged into chaos.
4 emperors ruled in a single year: Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and finally Vespasian. Each one briefly took the stage before being assassinated, defeated, or otherwise removed. It was basically Rome's version of speed dating with monarchs. The winner, Vespasian, founded the Flavian dynasty. He was practical, down to earth, and known for his sense of humor. He also started construction on the Colosseum. You know, that massive stadium where gladiators fought to the death for entertainment. Because nothing says stable government like inventing sports on hard mode. Let's take a breath. At this point, the Roman Empire had already experienced a recluse on an island, a man who may or may not have made his horse a senator, a surprise bookworm emperor poisoned by mushrooms, a teenage theater kid who set the city on fire, and 4 rulers in one chaotic year. And yet, Rome was still standing, still expanding, still pretending everything was fine. So as we drift further, we'll move into the next stretch, the so-called good emperors. Spoiler, they were only good compared to the disasters we just met. But compared to Nero, even a halfway functional adult looked like a saint. Part 3. The Good Emperors. Rome pretends to have its life together. Hey guys, welcome back. If you're still with me, you've either mastered the art of staying awake during ancient history, or you're already halfway to dreamland. Either way, let's drift on. We've just crawled out of Rome's chaotic family drama. Nero setting fires, Caligula appointing horses, Claudius being poisoned by suspicious mushrooms. The bar was low. So when a series of emperors came along who weren't complete disasters, everyone called them good. Tonight, let's float through that stretch of relative calm, the 5 rulers who made Rome feel stable again. Part 3. The Good Emperors. Rome pretends to have its life together. Hey guys, welcome back. If you're still with me, you've either mastered the art of staying awake during ancient history, or you're already halfway to dreamland. Either way, let's drift on. We've just crawled out of Rome's chaotic family drama. Nero setting fires, Caligula appointing horses, Claudius being poisoned by suspicious mushrooms. The bar was low. So when a series of emperors came along who weren't complete disasters, everyone called them good. Tonight, let's float through that stretch of relative calm, the 5 rulers who made Rome feel stable again. Nerva, Grandpa Emergency Replacement. We start in 96 CE. Nero's dynasty had collapsed, the Flavians had come and gone, and Rome needed a leader who wasn't going to burn down the city or drain the treasury on golden palaces. Enter Nerva. He was an elderly senator chosen mostly because he was safe. Nobody feared him, nobody thought he'd pull a Nero. He was essentially the empire's grandpa candidate. His job was to keep the peace and not make things worse. He did fine. Short reign, nothing flashy. But his real achievement was adopting a capable general as his heir, Trajan. This simple idea, adopting heirs based on competence, not bloodline, would define the so-called good emperors. Honestly, Rome should have thought of this sooner. Trajan, Rome goes big. Trajan took over in 98 CE, and suddenly the empire had a leader who actually liked leading. He was popular with both the Senate and the army, which was rare. Usually, those 2 groups despised each other. Under Trajan, Rome expanded to its greatest territorial extent. He conquered Dacia, modern-day Romania, which was rich in gold mines. He also pushed into the Middle East, briefly capturing Mesopotamia. Basically, he was that kid in a strategy game who can't stop clicking invade. But he wasn't just about war. He invested heavily in public works, roads, aqueducts, markets. Trajan's forum in Rome was so massive and impressive that later emperors mostly gave up trying to compete. It was the ancient equivalent of saying, "Don't bother renovating your kitchen. Mine already has granite countertops and heated floors." People adored him. After his death, the Senate even honored him with the title Optimus Princeps, which means best ruler, which, considering the competition, wasn't that hard. Next came Hadrian, Trajan's adopted heir. Hadrian was different. Where Trajan loved conquest, Hadrian preferred consolidation. Translation: instead of endlessly invading new places, he focused on shoring up the empire's defenses. He's most famous for building Hadrian's Wall in Britain. Yes, the one that basically said, "This far, no further." It stretched across northern England to keep out the Picts, the mysterious tattooed tribes from Scotland. The Romans never fully conquered Scotland. Honestly, nobody ever did. The weather alone defeated them. Hadrian also loved architecture. He built the Pantheon as we see it today, complete with that giant dome that still impresses tourists. He was a bit of a control freak too. He personally toured the empire, checking up on projects like a micromanaging boss who just had to review everyone's projects. But he had a tragic personal life. His greatest love was a young man named Antinous, who drowned in the Nile under mysterious circumstances. Hadrian was devastated. He deified Antinous, built statues of him everywhere, and even founded a city in his honor. Rome basically became covered in Antinous fan art.
Antoninus Pius, the boringly stable one. After Hadrian came Antoninus Pius, who reigned for over 20 years, and not much happened, which honestly was a blessing for Rome. Antoninus didn't wage major wars, he didn't build flashy monuments, he mostly kept things running smoothly, balanced the budget, and avoided unnecessary drama. He was in many ways the empire's reliable Gad figure, calm, steady, and maybe a little dull. Ancient historians barely had gossip to report on him, which is how you know he was doing something right. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor. Now we get to Marcus Aurelius, the last of the 5 good emperors. You might know him as the guy Russell Crowe admired in Gladiator, or as the author of Meditations, that little book of Stoic philosophy that still sells like hotcakes today. Marcus was thoughtful, bookish, and more interested in philosophy than politics, which would have been fine, except he ruled during one of Rome's rougher stretches. First, there were wars along the northern frontier. Germanic tribes kept pushing in, and Marcus spent much of his reign camped along the Danube River. Second, there was a massive plague, possibly smallpox, that ravaged the empire and killed millions. Not exactly the vibe he wanted for his reign. But Marcus bore it all with stoic calm. He wrote about endurance, duty, and the fleeting nature of life, which is inspiring, sure, but also a little depressing if you just wanted a chill emperor who didn't remind you constantly about mortality. And then there was his heir. Commodus, Rome's return to chaos. Marcus Aurelius made one big mistake. He broke the adopt competent heir system and left the throne to his biological son, Commodus. And wow, bad call. Commodus was the opposite of his father, spoiled, arrogant, and obsessed with gladiator games. He literally dressed up as Hercules, carried a club, and insisted on being worshipped as a demigod. Subtlety was not his strength. He loved performing in the Colosseum, not watching,
performing. He'd fight as a gladiator, except, surprise, his opponents weren't allowed to hurt him. So it was less a contest, more an elaborate ego trip. He renamed Rome after himself, Colonia Commodiana, because apparently the city's 800-year-old name wasn't good enough. He even renamed the months after his own titles. Eventually, everyone had enough. Commodus was strangled in his bath by a wrestler, which honestly feels like a very Roman ending. So let's take a slow breath here. Rome, for a brief golden window, had emperors who were competent, thoughtful, even philosophical. They expanded, they consolidated, they philosophized. For a moment, the empire looked stable, cultured, maybe even wise. And then Commodus happened, which just proves that Rome could never resist circling back to dysfunction. Next time, we'll drift gently into the 3rd century, the age of crisis. Think endless short-lived emperors, barbarian invasions, plagues, and economic collapse. Basically, Rome having the world's longest midlife crisis.
Part 4. The Crisis of the 3rd Century, Rome's never-ending identity crisis. Hey guys, welcome back. If you've somehow stayed awake this long, congratulations. You've endured the good emperors, Commodus's cosplay obsession, and a lot of marble architecture. Now, let's dim the lights a little further because we're drifting into one of Rome's most exhausting chapters. It's the 3rd century. Rome is still massive, but also falling apart at the seams. And what follows is about 50 years of chaos so confusing that even professional historians sometimes just sigh and say, yep, it was a mess. So let's float through it slowly, like Rome itself, staggering, wobbling, but somehow still standing. The setup. Commodus was just the beginning. When Commodus died in 192 CE, Rome breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, maybe things could get better. Spoiler, they did not. Instead, his assassination set off a chain reaction of civil wars, corruption, and an emperor turnover rate that makes modern politics look stable. The empire had grown too large, too complex, and too expensive to manage. The army was restless, the economy shaky, and provinces were constantly rebelling. Basically, Rome was like a massive Jenga tower. One wrong move, and everything started wobbling. The year of 5 emperors. In 193 CE, Rome outdid itself. Forget the earlier year of 4 emperors. This time, they managed 5 in a single year. It started with Pertinax, a decent old man who tried to restore order. Good intentions, terrible timing. The Praetorian Guard, Rome's elite bodyguards, didn't like him, so they killed him. Next, the Guard decided to literally auction off the throne to the highest bidder. Yes, really. A wealthy senator named Didius Julianus paid them the most money, so they declared him emperor. Imagine if the presidency was just sold on eBay. That was Rome in 193. Naturally, the people hated him, and he didn't last long either. Eventually, Septimius Severus took control. He was a general who actually knew how to lead troops, so the army supported him. He founded the Severan dynasty, which managed to hold power for a few decades. But stability? Not so much. The Severans. Family drama on repeat. Septimius Severus himself was fine. He strengthened the army, secured the borders, and spent most of his reign reminding his sons to behave, which, of course, they did not. His sons, Caracalla and Geta, inherited the throne together after his death, and in true Roman fashion, they immediately hated each other. Within months, Caracalla had Geta murdered, in their mother's arms, no less. Family bonding at its finest. Caracalla then ruled alone. He's remembered mostly for 2 things:
extending Roman citizenship to all free men in the empire, which sounds noble but was probably just a tax move, and ordering massacres whenever he felt insecure, which was often. He was eventually assassinated by a disgruntled soldier, because in Rome, that's how most emperors signed off. The Severine dynasty limped on through a few more unstable rulers until everything collapsed again. And this ushered in the real crisis, the crisis proper, 235 to 284 CE. Historians call this period the crisis of the 3rd century. It lasted nearly 50 years. And in that time, Rome had over 20 emperors. That's nearly one new emperor every 2 years. Most were military generals who grabbed power only to be assassinated, overthrown, or killed in battle almost immediately. The empire also fractured. At one point, it split into 3 separate states: the Roman Empire in the middle, the Gallic Empire in the west, modern France and Britain, the Palmyrene Empire in the east, led by Queen Zenobia. Yes, finally, a powerful woman in this saga. It was basically Rome's awkward teenage phase, except instead of bad haircuts, it had constant civil wars and invasions. External problems. Everyone attacks. While Rome was busy stabbing itself in the back, enemies noticed. Germanic tribes raided across the Rhine and Danube. The Persians attacked from the east. Pirates swarmed the seas. Plagues kept popping up,